All right. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, I guess it is now. I just want to recap what we covered last time. We were talking a little bit about flood zone. I guess it was more geared towards lomas and how we can get people out of a flood zone. But what I want to talk about and cover this morning is in closing is if I can't get a house out of a flood zone, and again here in Michigan 85% of the time when someone shows up in a flood zone we can get them out, but if I can't get them out, then what we do is we switch gears and we say, okay, how can we make this house marketable? How can we get the premiums down to a point where you may still be able to save the deal, and the buyer might not be walking away. Or this week, I just did one where the homeowners built a brand new house in 2004, and their basement is literally it's a finished basement, it's a walkout, and it's a half a foot too low. So yesterday, actually last night, I was on the phone with the husband and wife, and they're trying to sell their house, and their concern is now they just lost their buyer because they don't want to buy a house in a flood zone. So the point I'm making is we're switching gears. We're going to do an elevation certificate for them, and we're going to report the existing conditions. And then we're going to tell them a few things they can do to the house to bring those premiums down so that they won't lose their next buyer. Okay. So if we can't eliminate the flood insurance altogether, a lot of times we'll take an older home and we will add some flood vents or raise some mechanicals, do one, two, or three things to the house, and we will bring it into a compliancy mode. Okay. So I would say probably, I'm trying to think of some of the examples I've already used for you. One of my good stories as far as compliancy goes is there's a gentleman and his wife, and she was about to have a baby, and they were up in the Clarkston area, and they had a house that was they purchased, but nobody bothered to tell them it was in a flood zone. Uh, so a few months went by, and they found out that they were going to have to pay 4,200 a year. What should have happened in that situation is the realtor for the sell or for the buyer should have said, "Look, I noticed that your house is in a flood zone. Before we buy this house, let's call a surveyor in and see if there's something we can do." So I would have come in, I would have checked the house and told them, no, it's too low. However, if you raise your AC unit on the water side of the house and put some flood vents in your garage floor, we can get your premiums down. And that's exactly what we did. And so in this case, we would have given him two elevation certificates before he purchased the house. The first one would have been an elevation certificate reporting his existing conditions. The second one would have been some proposed changes, and we would have checked the proposed box, and he would have been able to give both of those elevation certificates to his insurance agent. Remember, he doesn't own the house yet, so he can't go and install flood vents and raise AC units in some other house that he doesn't even own. So this is what we would do for your buyers. We'd give him two elevation certificates, and when he hands the first one to his insurance agent, he would say, how much with these existing conditions? And without the elevation certificate, the insurance company was already quoting him 4,200 a year. Once he handed him an elevation certificate, which is some known numbers on the house, it came down to 2,700 a year. Then he should give the insurance agent the proposed changes and say, once I own this house and I make these changes to the house, what exactly will my premiums be then? And the insurance agent will come back and say, only $400 a year now. So now the buyer is no longer walking, and it's a happy ending. And that's the difference between a non-compliant house and a compliant house. So again, this is my own little special formula. Basically, there's one, two, or three things we might do to a house to make it compliant. These are houses that are most likely built before the first flood map. Somebody built it too low, not knowing where the true flood zone was. and now we can't get them out of a flood zone. So we switch gears, and maybe we would install or have them install some flood vents. Those would be engineered flood vents. Or maybe we would elevate those mechanicals. That's what I told the couple yesterday, last night when I talked to them. They had the walkout basement where the basement was a foot too low. Even though their basement is finished off, their mechanicals are sitting on the floor down there. So I told them to get somebody in there to raise those mechanicals up 6 or 8 inches, and then we could do an elevation certificate and get those premiums down. And lastly, we might sometimes adjust some elevations, okay? And so these are the crappy vents that everybody has in their houses today. This is just a vent that you'll always see in a foundation, for instance, with a crawl. And we can't really count this as an engineered vent. It would have to be permanently disabled in an open position. We live in Michigan, and we do not want all that cold air under our house during the wintertime. So that is why an engineered vent, and this is what an engineered flood vent looks like, that is why this is so much more suitable for an Michigan foundation. Okay, so if we're going to do install some flood vents, we can actually help you. Probably the best place to send you if you're interested in reading a little bit more about these engineered flood vents is the king of vents out there is a vent called Smart Vent, just like a smart person. You can Google the word Smart Vent and go to their website. They have all kinds of videos. They can educate you a little more on what the whole purpose of a vent is. Okay, so again, vents that are called Smart Vent, they're a little bit more expensive. Well, not a little bit, a lot more. They're more than $200 each. But they're fancier. They've got these little slits in the side. So normally this entire door would be locked in place so that varmints could not get in and out. However, once the water starts raising up on the wall, it would actually disengage the lock in that little slit, and the entire door swings open, and it allows the water, okay, to equalize on both sides of the wall. Okay, so the water would come in the event of a flood through the vents, and it would fill into the crawl area, and you would have no hydrostatic pressures building up on the wall because the wall would be supported on both sides by the water. Okay, and that's the theory behind a smart vent or a flood vent. Okay, and this is a couple different smart vents, but if you end up putting vents in a house, you do not want to do it without some supervision. We would help you. We can help you to make sure they go in correctly. And we also, in my office, if you call my office and we decide you need flood vents, we can actually point you towards much cheaper vents than these if you don't want the real fancy ones. Okay, and this is just a picture. Ideally, when people are building houses in flood zones, ideally we want the ground on the outside to equal the crawl floor in the inside. Okay, on at least one wall. Okay, so we want this ground to be low enough on at least one wall so we don't have a cavity, a pocket that goes into the ground that will not drain. Okay, so that's when we have new construction, or sometimes we'll adjust some elevations, drop the ground outside a few inches, maybe raise the crawl a little bit to get that equal elevation. That will get you your optimum, cheapest flood insurance. Okay, again, this is if I can't get a house out of a flood zone. Now we're switching gears. We're trying not to lose an actual seller. Okay, or I'm sorry, a buyer. So if you're actually have a walkout basement, a lot of people don't know if you can make a walkout basement compliant. This obviously is having some flooding issues, and most people would think you could never get out of a flood zone here, which is probably likely, but you may be able to install some engineered flood vents. Now, the only time this would be allowed in a walkout basement area would be if there's no living space in the lower level. I had one in Lansing once that it was a really nice house with a walkout on water, and they couldn't sell it for a couple of years, and then they finally called me in. And they had a mother-in-law's apartment down in this lower level. I don't know why anybody would have a mother-in-law in their basement, but that's what they had. It was finished off. So what they did, because there was literally going to be 2 to 3 feet of water in that lower level, and because of that being in a flood zone, the flood premiums were astronomical and they couldn't sell it. So they went down there and they tore out some cabinets and they made that a non-finished basement. They installed some flood vents in there. They elevated their mechanicals above the 100-year flood zone. So they either elevated them off of the floor or they hung them from the rafters. And now we can get those premiums down very often to less than $1,000 a year, which is really cheap for flood insurance. If we can get it around 400 to 600, we're doing good. Okay. And now the house is marketable again. That house actually sold immediately. Because we are kind of short on time because we're only doing a half hour at a time, I kind of want to save the last part of this presentation where I'm going to break out and I'm going to go to the to Google a FEMA flood zone site, and I'm going to show you how to get there. So let me just cover a couple of last things and then we're going to bounce out of here. So if you have any questions, you may want to start typing them right now, because in a few minutes here, I'm going to be jumping to another screen, and that would be a good time to ask some final questions before we go and start looking up some properties. Okay. So if you have vacant land that's completely blanketed in a flood zone, you got blue everywhere on the flood map, many people think the property is not marketable, you can't build in there. And that's absolutely wrong. In fact, this morning I was putting together some acreage amounts. I have a, out near Holt, I have a 32-acre parcel that's been in the family for almost 100 years. And they ran a drain through there sometime back in the 40s or 50s. And it totally devalued the property because now it's all been thrown into a flood zone. And we went out to that area and we shot a bunch of the ground, and we determined we've got about 5 to 7 acres that are completely out of a flood zone, even though everything's blanketed in a flood zone. Most of it's in a floodway, which I did talk to you about that. That was moving water, so we can't do anything in that. But we do have a couple acres that are in a flood zone, but they're, and in those cases, we could still build in a flood zone, but we would want to raise the ground up before we build the structure. Or we would install flood vents and just raise the living space up. So if you have a large piece of vacant property, many times we'll go in, shoot some elevations, determine that a large portion or a small portion is not really in a flood zone like they show. And so we'll actually carve out like a parcel inside of a bigger parcel. We'll carve it out and we'll tell FEMA we want to amend the map and take that ground out. Now the property is marketable again. Now you have a nice building envelope to put a house. And we can do that both ways. If the ground is high enough, we just carve it out and show everybody, no, this was inadvertently shown in a flood zone. Or if the ground is too low, we'd be able to raise the ground up and build the new structure out of a flood zone. So now you're really, really smart. We're kind of towards the end here of the presentation. You know what a LOMA is. All of our LOMAs are electronic LOMAs, which are e-LOMAs, but we have fast ones and slow ones, okay? And in this case, the slow ones are the ones that we have to send off electronically and wait for FEMA. And then we have those LOMAR apps where we raise the ground and then remove either a house or land from the flood zone with fill. So it's a letter of map revision with fill. And then we, so now we're basically all experts and teachers. Everybody can go on and teach everyone what you learned here in the last 4 sessions. You will, I think we discussed how we were going to send out a copy of this presentation to everyone. So you should get a copy. I've got a couple of sites I want to go to here in a second. And on my website, there is some important links. These are some important phone numbers that you can use, and a couple of links that we could use as well. So I want to jump out of my slide presentation here. And again, this would be, those are some instructions for looking at properties. But this would be a good time for you guys to send any questions if you do, because I'm going to stop the share on this screen and I'm going to literally go and share a different screen right now, which is going to be a Google search engine. Okay. So hopefully you'll bear with me for 1 second and let me know if any questions come in so I can answer them. All right. All right. So this is the actual well, actually, it went a little too far. Let me go back to the Google search engine. What I want you to do in the future, and again, if we had business cards to distribute, on the bottom of my business card, you would actually see um, the instructions on how to go look up your structure. The reason I send you to my website to find this FEMA link is because FEMA is really good at breaking stuff. Okay, they will break their site again and again and again, and many times this has happened where they shut the site down altogether and nobody can find the site, and then everyone floods our office with questions as to how can we look our properties up. The site's no longer working. So I'm always going to have a current site on my website where you can go to look up properties. I'll make sure I upload it. So I would suggest you just remember my website just in case for some reason the FEMA site's not working. So here's what you do. You Google the word flood zone expert, and then my company will come up, and you click on the resources page. And when you do that, my website comes up. Now you can actually get to my main website and click on the resources page, and you'll get to this picture as well, this page, I mean. And so what you want to do is you want to look it up under ArcGIS, and that's what we're going to do. That's my favorite. Google Earth also we can look it up under. These are both FEMA sites, but the ArcGIS, we prefer that because I'm going to show you a couple of cool things you can do there. Okay. So when we go to the ArcGIS, now we're into the FEMA site. So once you go there and you get this far, you can actually save this FEMA link onto your desktop, laptops, your iPads, okay, your phones, and save it somewhere so you can keep going back to this site. Now, what you would probably want to do is type in your address of a property that you're looking up in the upper corner. Okay, now if anybody has a property that they're wondering whether, or they know that's in a flood zone, that would be ideal. I would love to look that property up as an example. But right now, and go ahead and email or text us whatever that question or that address, and we could look it up. Right now, when you open up the site, you're going to always have to go turn on a layer that FEMA was so kind as to turn off. They broke their site again. So you're going to click on that layers button in the corner. You're going to go to the middle checked box, which is the National Flood Hazard layer, and you're going to click that diamond right in front, and the pull down menu comes up, and you're going to turn on the LOMAs. Okay, so see all those purple dots that just came up? We just turned on all the LOMAs in the entire country. All right, and these are people who have gotten out of a flood zone. So now if we want to zoom in, and right now we're zooming into an area down in Lansing, and I'm going to look at some of these purple dots. Now, if you remember from our last session, we were talking about floodways, okay? And I want you to see all this cross-hatching here. See, this is all floodway. So this is, again, we're really close to we're actually in the city of Lansing, as you can see. Here's the date the map came out for the city of Lansing.
Carol,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
something's going on with the share. We're not able to see what you're seeing.
Oh,
We
no
only
way.
see Google.
Could you see Google?
All I see is the Google homepage. I don't see any of the FEMA.
All right, here, I'm going to close out real quick. I'm going to go back and try and share again. I'm glad you're asking. You're saying something. That was bad. Let me go back. Screen sharing has stopped. Oh, okay, interesting. It said that okay, hang on one sec. Let me see if I can get back to it in here.
I know
Okay.
that sometimes with the sharing, you have to specify what window you're sharing.
Oh yeah, I always click on it.
Okay.
Okay. Let me jump over here. Let me see. I'm trying to find, let me jump over to my, it's not letting me get out of my, that's weird. And I don't want to, I don't want to close out the Zoom, but it's not letting me in there. Let me try. Trying to find the Google that you might be seeing. So give me 1 second. Let me try that. And I'll open that up. There we go. Okay, so let me try this again. I reopened it. And you let me know. Are you still seeing Google or what are you seeing?
I see your face right now. Now Google is back up.
Perfect. Okay, so let me know if you can see me typing.
I can see you typing in the URL.
Right. Okay, so we should be good from here. Okay, so Flood Zone Expert is where you're going to go. You're going to click on the resources page, okay? And then you're going to go in. Once you get to my resources page, the very first link is the one that you're going to want to click on right here, okay? And once you click on that link, it's going to, of course, right now we are now taken to a FEMA site, okay? And when the FEMA site comes up, all these boxes come up. You kind of want to minimize these boxes. They're just kind of getting your way. And so here's your search engine box. This is how you look your properties up. You know that the FEMA site has loaded correctly when you see all these red boxes, okay? And then in the upper left corner is where you're going to actually type in the address of your property. Has anybody given us an address or no?
Yep.
Oh, really? What was the address?
5550 Ballantine Road. Ballantine. And that's Bath, Michigan 48808.
Okay. All right, so very often it'll come up like that and you click on it. Okay, so this entire area that we're in right here is in a flood zone, obviously, and you're gonna see that in 1 second. It's loading. I think it is anyways. It's all blue. So I'm gonna zoom out and show you. This looks like the property right here. Now, before we go any further, I wanna show you how to turn on all those nearby lomas. I showed you again before, but I guess you weren't seeing it. Up in the upper right corner, and you're going to have to do this every time you go to this site because FEMA broke it. Thank you, FEMA. You want to go up into the corner where the layers button is, click on the layers button. There's 3 buttons to check, and you go to the middle checked button, which is the National Flood Hazard layer, and you click on the little diamond right in front of the check mark, and you want to go down and check the box right in front of the word Loma because we want to turn on all the Lomas, okay? So once we do that, we can close that box out, all right? And now we're gonna zoom out to show you that we really are completely in a flood zone with that black dot. So here's the property where it's plotting up, and I believe it's right on the corner if it's plotting up correctly. And you can see that over here we have the Looking Glass River, okay? And so this whole area is flooding, okay? And so that house that was just given to us, that address, is truly in a flood zone. It does not look like anybody has done a Loma on it. Let me just say that there are a ton of Lomas in this area. You can see all these little purple dots. Those are Lomas. And sometimes one purple dot might have 2, 3, 4, or 5 Lomas in one dot, okay? And that usually happens more in like a city when you're in a more populated area. We're out in the country, so these purple dots are probably just one Loma at a time. What I want to show you is if you were listing that property on the corner right there, you would kind of want to know, well, does other people, have they successfully gotten out in the area? So you might take your little mouse and you drag it over and left click on the purple dot. When you do that, a box comes up and it says download letter here, okay? So we're actually going to call up a nearby Loma. And you can see that back in 2007, this house got removed, okay, from the flood zone. And I'm going to raise it up. It's 5145 Ballantine Road got removed, okay? And they were quite a bit above the flood zone. You can see the maps in this area are very poor. These guys were 12 feet above the flood zone. So it was kind of a ridiculous thing that that area was all blanketed. So again, I tell you over and over again, I'm going to close that one Loma out, and I want to go back. Here we screw up on this part. Let me close that Loma out. There we go. So again, on any of these, you can go in and zoom in and look at these other Lomas. Like here's one that's right on the river, and somebody there did a Loma, and we're going to click on that one, and we're going to see again it was removed. All right, and they're over on Babcock Road. So I just want to show you that this is how you can look up nearby Lomas when you're looking up your properties. All right, now it's really important to understand. Did anybody have a question on that one that we just looked up? Because I was going to move on.
None that I am seeing.
Okay, good. So this property is plotting up right here, and it's completely in the middle of a flood zone. You can see it. Okay, so that would be a house that we would go check. For a couple $100, we'd tell them yes or no, we can get you out of a flood zone or not. As I zoom out, you can see this whole area is blanketed with a ton of Lomas. All right, we're kind of out in the country here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over towards Lansing where I was at before when you couldn't see. And
Carol,
yep.
I do have a Lansing address too here if you want to type that.
Perfect. Let's do that.
612 South Hayford, Hayford Ave, Lansing, 48912.
Is it Hayfo? Yep, there it is. Okay. All right. So I'm looking at it right here, and it's loading. And it looks like it's definitely, this whole area again is in a flood zone. The bad news is that I'm looking at right here, and again, this is where this black dot is, so it might be a house over in here in the trees. The bad news is it could be bad news, could be good news, hard to say. But the bad news is right now that we don't see any purple dots in this area. So what does that mean? That means that this might truly be a low area, and it might actually flood, okay? Or it might mean that nobody in the area has actually heard about getting out of a flood zone. So let's go click at this one. This one's right on the edge of the flood zone. This is the nearest Loma that I can see. And I'm going to look and see what the results were there. Okay, so this is a non-removal, okay? And this whole area appears to be pretty darn low, okay? Because this particular house was, looks like, wow, about 8 feet into a flood zone. There's going to be 8 feet of water at its lowest point. So I think I have tried to do Lomas up in this area, and I think it is. There's like a low pocket up here where many of these houses will flood. So if the house has a basement, okay, there's certain things we sometimes can do. All right. So if anybody has a question about that one specifically, you can chime in, or you can give us the call also. This is all floodway. Here's the river nearby. Again, this is a river that's causing all the havoc in the area. It's the Red Cedar River. And again, this is all cross-hatching right here. So that's floodway with moving water. And that's pretty much it. We're right up against the 12:30 mark. I wanted to show you guys how to look these properties up. If you call our office, we look these things up for free for you. If you need any advice on properties that you're trying to list and you looked it up and you don't like what you see, you can always call us and we can help you out. Okay. I want to just give you my office number. I don't know. Did you forward the PowerPoint to them? And if so, did you give them my contact information or?
The PowerPoint has not been sent out yet. I was waiting for the series to finish before sending that. But I can certainly include your contact information.
Okay, and how about if I send you some instructions on what we just talked about at the end, how to look up properties, okay? I'm going to send you some play-by-play instructions on where to go and what buttons to push to get here, okay? And that should take us up to the end of this fourth session. Hopefully you guys learned some things. And I guess we can close it out at that. All right.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any other questions. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Carol, for sharing your great expertise with us. And look out for the recording of this class as well as the PowerPoint with Carol's contact information so that you can reach out to her going forward. Thanks again, everyone.